Sidney Powell pleading guilty in the Fulton County case, the Fulton County election case against her, agreeing to, I believe, 12 months probation, to pay a fine, and to cooperate as a witness in the investigation into other people, including presumably former President Donald Trump. I want to get right back to Caitlin Polantz very quickly. Caitlin, just remind us what she is pleading guilty to. Ellie Honig, our senior legal analyst, is here as well. Caitlin, what was Sidney Powell accused of that she just admitted to doing?
Well, John and Kate, there are two parts to what she is admitting here as part of this misdemeanor plea deal that comes with quite a lot of stipulations, including her having to testify at future trials against people like Donald Trump. Those parts are essentially that she previously had been accused in this case as taking part of the racketeering conspiracy. So that's very likely something that she would be testifying to. But what she's pleading guilty here in this case in Fulton County, Georgia, is related to Coffee County, that rural county outside of Atlanta, where there were voting machines, and she was accused of being part of a group of people that were hacking them. So this is a misdemeanor deal. It is not her pleading guilty to the specific felony charges that she was charged with, but she is admitting to taking part in that portion of what had happened there in Coffee County. Very likely will be speaking in a way where her words can be used against those other defendants accused of the hacking conspiracy in Coffee County, trying to get access to that voting system there, but also she is part of a much bigger conspiracy case, the racketeering case against Donald Trump and others, which accuses her of being part of the top echelon of lawyers around Donald Trump that were trying to undermine the election. And even though the charges in Georgia for her previously and in this case were specifically about Coffee County, she was a person that was with the White House, in the White House, next to Rudy Giuliani at public appearances, and part of that effort where various lawyers around the country were trying to put allegations of fraud into the court system, of voter fraud, and those allegations ultimately were false.
And Ellie, we want to get your reaction to this, just because Sidney Powell, there were few people who pushed the conspiracy theories and election fraud theories, and some of the most wild of them involving Venezuela, Hugo Chavez. Few people pushed it further than Sidney Powell.
Yeah, that's right, Kate. It's important to remember who Sidney Powell is. She's one of Donald Trump's closest loyalists. She's somebody who Donald Trump has claimed he relied on her advice to proceed in his effort to try to steal this election. This is a major breakthrough for prosecutors, potentially a devastating development for Donald Trump, because what's going to happen now is Sidney Powell is going to testify for prosecutors in Georgia. And presumably, she'll also be prepared to testify for Jack Smith in his federal case in Washington, D.C. She's not indicted in that case, but she's listed as a co-conspirator in that case. She's going to be able to provide insider information that could be really devastating towards Donald Trump.
She was in the room where some things, if not happened, were at least discussed, Ellie. She was part of some of these contentious meetings that allegedly took place in the White House before January 6th. How can prosecutors now use her?
So you use her to bring your jury into that very room. She will be the guide. She will be the narrator. She will be able to say, I was in this room with Donald Trump, with Rudy Giuliani. Here's what we discussed. Here's who said what. Here's what we knew. And John, really importantly, in order to take this plea and this deal, Sidney Powell is going to have to acknowledge what we did was criminal. It was illegal. It was a crime. And so that's going to lend a lot of credibility, I think, obviously, to prosecutors' assertions that what Donald Trump did was knowingly a crime, was an intentional crime. So now they've sort of got an ultimate insider, somebody who has remained steadfastly loyal to Donald Trump, to the stolen election narrative. Now she has flipped. Now she has come clean. Now she's going to be a prosecution witness.
She was on election night. She was at the White House watching the returns come in. That's according to some of her testimony to House investigators, though she declined to speak about a lot of stuff. So that's what you're getting at. Like, she can speak to basically everything in terms of Donald Trump's involvement. But is there any limit Ellie, to what, in terms of a plea deal, and I don't know if the details need to come further out to know this, but is there any limit to what how prosecutors can use her, what they can have her testify to?
So typically, Kate, cooperation has to be all or nothing. Prosecutors do not accept partial cooperation. Well, you can just tell us some details or some facts, or you can just testify about some people but not others. The standard cooperation plea deal is you have to give up everybody, you have to give up everything, and you have to be willing to testify in this court and any other court where you're needed. So again, the implications here go to the Fulton County DA's charges down in Georgia, but I think they also are going to go to Jack Smith's charges, the federal case in Washington, D.C. I think she's now going to become a potential witness for him as well.
Caitlin, talk to me about the timing here, because jury selection getting underway within days in Georgia. Sidney Powell asked for the speedy trial. Kenneth Chesebro has also asked for a speedy trial. Explain the timing here and the potential impact on these other cases.
Well, the potential impact is potentially quite significant, given that she is someone who was in the room at the White House up until mid-December, and she was involved in these issues in Georgia that she's admitting to now. But one of the things about the timing is that this just shows how the system incentivizes people to avoid trial, to cooperate with prosecutors. So she's doing this right before the trial is set to begin with jury selection at the end of this week. November 5th is the date procedurally where that guilty plea, that's the no turning back date on this guilty plea. That's whenever the trial will formally kick off against her, or previously would have been her and Ken Chesebro. And so with that setup, it alleviates the need for the prosecutors to try her. But John and Kate, just following her case, following her as a person over not just related to the 2020 election, but the whole way through the Trump administration when she was a lawyer representing Michael Flynn on doing his case. This is quite a surprise to see Sidney Powell become the second person in this 19-person indictment in Georgia to choose to plead guilty here and cooperate. She, as a person, is incredibly set in her beliefs, it appears. I remember in court she used to wear a blazer that said Carpe Diem on the lapel. And she is the type of lawyer who is a fighter and has branded herself as such. And even in recent hearings in this case in Georgia, her lawyers were very much looking toward specific pieces of evidence they had identified, believing they could use that and they could fight this case and they could win. That is clearly not the decision that they're going with at this time, though.
Wasn't Sidney Powell the one that everyone called the Kraken, or they tried to refer to?
Release the Kraken.
Yeah.
She called for the release of the Kraken.
Ellie, sorry. Final question, Ellie. If you are an attorney representing any of the other defendants, including Donald Trump right now, what's your conversation with your client?
My conversation is, okay, tell me every time you ever spoke with Sidney Powell, everything you ever said to Sidney Powell, every meeting you were ever in with Sidney Powell, because now the prosecutors have all of that. And you have to prepare to cross-examine her. There is a standard line of cross-examination that a defense lawyer will use to cross-examine Sidney Powell. You only cooperated to try to save yourself. You're just trying to tell prosecutors what they want to hear. But prosecutors are used to that. Prosecutors know how to come back to that. The main thing that you're looking for as a prosecutor is, did this person have access? Clearly, Sidney Powell did have access to those key meetings you've talked about. Do we believe her testimony now? Has she come clean? And can we back her up? Clearly, the Fulton County DA has answered yes on all those questions. I think Jack Smith likely will too. And now she's going to be a crucial witness in this trial, or perhaps multiple.